thank everybody for coming in this evening. We have a very special edition of Junior Bike Chat. Today we have with us the USA Cycling National Team Director, Billy Innes. We have Barney King, who's coached I don't even know how many juniors through to the senior ranks and into being world champions and other professional riders. And then we have our old friend, Joe Holmes, who has done an incredible amount for the sport over the years, working with a variety of different world champions and national champions, and actually working to help develop a number of U23 and junior teams over the years. And so we can have a little bit of discussion about that. The way we're going to work this today is we're going to start off with some conversation based around some topics that we've been kicking around for a number of years. We'll do that for about the first half hour. And then in the second half an hour, we'll be fielding all the questions that have been thrown at us, and we'll deal with some of those probably along the way because they're relevant for some of our other conversation. I want to make sure that everybody's aware that there is a QA button down at the bottom, and we will be monitoring that, and those questions will be forwarded off to our humble guests, and they will address them. And we will be taking questions on Instagram and things like that. We're monitoring those channels. This is going live out via our YouTube channel, Junior Cycling Network, which we have managed to appropriate, and which was actually started by Katie Burford's son, who I believe is on the call somewhere here, and was our guest moderator last week. And then we actually do record these, and we will be posting them out after the fact on the JCN network. So I wanted to start it off with something easy for each of you guys. And it was actually a question that was brought up by one of the juniors. So why do you guys love cycling so much?
Wow. Well, for me personally, if I can start, it still reminds me of when I first learned how to ride. To be honest with you, I grew up in Queens, New York, which is very compact area, big neighborhoods. Obviously, I grew up in a row house. All the houses were attached, and it was freedom. Cycling was freedom to me. So when I first learned how to ride, I could ride all over to my friend's house, and I still feel that way even now. And cycling now is obviously taken on a much bigger part of my life. And I just love it. I like the marriage between technology and ability, physiology and stuff like that. So for me, it's just a really interesting sport, and I guess I'm a lifer at this point.
Joe?
Yeah, I'll echo what Billy said. Definitely a lifer for sure. Got into it as a kid, and I grew up in the farmlands in Northwest Ohio, and it gave me the opportunity to, it started just riding back and forth to baseball practice or soccer practice. And then it became a focus in and of itself, probably because I was terrible at baseball and soccer, but just being able to get out and ride. And I got involved with a local club and started racing, and I half joke I haven't found a 12-step program that works yet. I keep trying to quit, but I keep coming back to it. So, and I'm fortunate enough that I've been able to kind of carve out a way to make a living doing something I love. And I feel very fortunate to be able to do that.
Barney?
Well, the same things that Billy and Joe said, I would like to echo. The freedom of being on a bike is like none other. I started in the sport actually a little later, but I owned a bike shop for 11 years, and my sons got interested in the sport or interested in riding, and through them I just basically kept continuing to be involved in the sport. And have been involved in the sport for over 30 years at this point in time. And my greatest love right now is to put on a pair of old shorts and a shirt that has nothing to do with cycling on it, and get on my townie and ride around the neighborhood and be completely incognito and remember the things that made me so happy when I was a kid. And I used to get on my bike because there's no stress, there's no strain. It's just enjoying the love of the sport.
Very cool. I mean, that's the same, that's exactly why I'm in the sport also. And like Joe, you would say I'm a lifer. So today, I mean, it was released that national championships were most likely going to be canceled for the road. And when we start thinking about that and dovetailing, oh, there's the cat.
Sorry, that was my cat. Yeah, she likes to make it. She likes to make an appearance on Zoom a lot.
So, you know, with national championships potentially being canceled this year, and it dovetails in with the bigger picture, is what recommendations do you guys have to parents and, you know, to our young riders to cope with the pandemic and this idea of social distancing, and then, you know, both on the training and the life balance stuff?
Yeah, the nationals thing, I mean, it cuts, you know, I know it hurts all of us. Whether it's 100% canceled road, that is, if road is 100% canceled or not, it's going to really depend. Hopefully in 2 weeks we'll find out some more. But yeah, social distancing, it's been interesting. You know, I've heard stories about people getting together and really needing to be in a group for whatever reason, which I don't necessarily agree with. I think it's a good idea to ride by yourself right now. I think it's just to be safe. You don't really know who has been where. If you're in that group and you don't know if that person just went to fill their car with gasoline and didn't sanitize and whatever, it's just a big risk. Personally, that's what I think. So yeah, riding by yourself is challenging, I think, when you're young and you like to be with your friends and be with a group. So it takes a certain amount of mental fortitude. I think all of us, even guys that I ride with, I mean, I'm much older and it's been tough on some of them too, because we're very social, but it's the kind of thing you just, like I was telling you before, this is temporary. It's not going to be permanent. It might go on for a while. And when you're 17 or 16, it may feel like it's forever, but it will end eventually. I hope. I hope anyway. I don't know. I'm not an epidemiologist.
Yeah, I mean,
Sorry, Sean.
go.
One thing I was going to add is I think, I mean, at least for me, we talked about how we got involved in the freedom. And part of it for me, when I started, and this is still a part of really any endurance activity like cycling is a lot of it, I just kind of like to get in my own head and go out and ride. So the riding on my own kind of thing, it's, for me personally, isn't as big of a challenge. And to what Billy said, I mean, hopefully it's just going to be a temporary thing. And yeah, you just got to kind of get through that. And there are alternatives, you know, like with virtual riding and things like that, where you can still get that camaraderie if that's something that you need to do.
Yeah, and so Pete Taylor kind of brought up here, you know, assuming that we don't have nationals this year for juniors, basically, should we cut bait and just start fresh for next year? Or
Yeah,
would you prefer that we actually have races this year at some point and just kind of move forward that way?
I mean, personally, I want racing. I think all of us do. I think it pretty much, if you're a bike racer, you want to race. What that's going to look like could be a challenge. It could be something we've talked about at length internally, and even I've talked with directors in France and directors in Italy. It may become hyper local. It may be a Wednesday night time trial. That may be the first thing you can do, and you're going to have a lot of people show up because everyone's itching to race. Now, whether nationals become something a little bit smaller, that's been a discussion, you know, internally. I don't have the information because I'm not in the events team, but it has been a discussion whether we can do a smaller event but I don't know. And I think that was part of the statement today, even with the pros. The pro field tends to be a little bit smaller, so perhaps they could run a nationals that's smaller. You know, having all the junior categories in one spot, you're talking about hundreds of kids. I don't really know if that's going to happen, but I really would like it to, but I don't know. I just don't know right now.
I think one thing for juniors to keep in mind, and anybody for that matter, is this: you can have an injury, you can have an illness. They're, basically isolated to that individual. This particular situation is across the board, and everybody's in the same situation. Nobody is being spared for this. And for individuals to use it as an opportunity to advance and improve and do those things that they have complete control of, I think is really important to press with individuals, young riders especially. They can improve in this period of time. If you have an injury and it keeps you out of a national championship or a world championship or an important race that you've prepared for, that's your burden to bear. This is across the board, and everybody's in the same situation. So it's not just you being kept out of nationals. It's not just you being kept out of a camp. It's not just you not being able to do your favorite race. It's everybody. So the old saying, is we're all in this together. As cliche as that sound and as tired as you get hearing that, it's an actual fact. So there's nothing you can do other than try to take the opportunity to improve yourself and, catch up on some things you maybe missed. When it's race and recover, that's all you're doing. Now you have the ability to go out and make some gains that you wouldn't likely be able to make just with race and recover mode. So I think it's important.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that's something that I've been pondering, even with the athletes that I'm coaching currently, is that this has become a really large base period, which is not necessarily a bad thing when you're young. And you can take chances on certain workouts and certain things now that will have no impact in 2 or 3 weeks because you have an event coming up. And so that is what I would recommend to athletes now, is that you can work on the things that you really, really despise, which is, and that's normal. Every athlete will have something. I don't like sprinting, or I don't like climbing, or, I'm really good at time trialing or whatever. And you can work on different things because it's not going to do any, I don't want to say damage, but you know what I'm saying? It's not going to really affect, because you don't have a race the next week. So it's not that big of a deal. And, I think all the juniors that are on this call, you have to realize something, that you have an ability now to ride. You're not in Spain and you're not in Italy. In Belgium, I've talked to some friends that, they're stuck. They have not been able to leave their house at all. You are very lucky that you're actually able to go out and ride. And you have to take that to heart. So in some ways, we actually have a leg up on some of those countries right now because they've literally not ridden outside. They've only done virtual training. And so you guys have this massive base that you can build on for when racing resumes. When that is, that's the challenge, and that is a challenge for everybody. But yeah, I agree with Barney 100%.
And it might even be an opportunity, this could be an opportunity where so many athletes now, you go from road season into cross season. And then when we're talking about juniors too, and then they're in school and there's the travel. And oftentimes just having that ability to where there is no competition, there is no travel, there is no school, you can do those longer, base building rides that are so important for your overall development. So I don't know, it's look at it as an opportunity to do that. And it's not like Barney said, there's no fear of missing out. You're not missing out on anything. Everybody's in the exact same boat. So.
Great. So to kind of dovetail off of that, especially what Joe was getting at there and talking about these different seasons, I mean, what's your real thought about having these multiple cycling disciplines, and there's now a lot of crossover with the athletes between the different disciplines? I know, each of you have worked with athletes that have done this. I mean, how do you navigate that along with the travel and the school and all that stuff, right? I mean, it's a lot. You're throwing a lot of pressure on the kids.
Yeah, it can be. It can be a really large challenge, and most of that challenge will stem from time management. When you're young, time management is a challenge, and that's normal. And I mean, I'm 48 and I'm time challenged all the time. But I think you have to take certain things into perspective about how we do things here compared to how other countries do some things. And for one, cross is a good example. So cross is really popular, but and I love cross, absolutely. And I think to build towards cross, you need certain things if you want to be competing at the top level. And I can just tell you from experience that when I am in Europe in June and July, all the cross racers are racing road races and kermesses and stage races. I've seen Wout van Aert and his team at the Binkbank Tour and the Tour of Belgium and all these races in August to prepare for cyclocross. So perhaps going to a cross camp, just doing a cross camp and thinking that you're going to be competitive in cyclocross is a little bit short-sighted. I think you have to put in the work in order to get really, really good. Having that season flow into other seasons can be a large challenge, especially with school and especially with travel, but it's something that you really have to manage. Now, I'm a big fan of cross discipline. I think you should ride your bike from BMX, mountain, cross, road, everything you can possibly do personally, but where does that fit in with the summer? We don't have 52 weeks of summer, so that's a challenge. So you're going to have to make some capitulation in some respects. And then if you start doing gravel, there's that too. So yeah, it's a really, really large challenge, but can it be managed? I think so.
I also think that with young individuals or any individual, you have to make choices. If you go to the buffet, you can't eat everything in the buffet. You have to pick your meals. You have to pick the things you want to eat, the things you like, whatever. So if young people learn, the sooner they learn that they have to make certain choices and certain decisions and concentrate on things. Yes, do whatever you want to do, enjoy it, have fun, do the things that resonate with you. But at certain points in time, you can't do everything. If there are 3 races on a weekend, you can't do all 3 of them, most likely. The travel logistics alone would be a nightmare. So pick your poison, pick the things you want to do, and then be satisfied that you have to forego some things.
And don't ignore the fact too that I think so many kids get wrapped up. But first of all, I think that when you're young in the sport, whether we're talking about juniors or someone that's just getting involved in the sport, in their 20s or 30s or whatever, race as much as you can. Okay. Like do as many different disciplines as you can. But at a certain point, yeah, you have to come to a decision of what do you want to focus on, because all that travel, you're not resting and you're not training, but it's still a stressor on the body. And there's all the things that are involved in different disciplines, different racing that I think a lot of athletes don't even think about or ignore. So yeah, at a certain point, and especially as you start to get to the tip of the spear, you gotta make a decision. But dab a little bit and then figure it out.
So we've had a couple of specific questions regarding training, and especially during the pandemic, right? What about, some of these kids are younger, right? And they really can't go out by themselves for really long rides, right? For whatever reasons, maybe there's not enough safe environment or whatever. What recommendations do you have for them?
I think shorter loops are if you can make a shorter loop that's close to your house, I think that could help a lot. And this way your parents know where you are. Even myself locally here in Northern California, we call it the Loop, and it's a 10-mile loop that's close to Stanford University. And when the I guess the state recommendations were you couldn't leave more than 5 miles from your house, and some of us really adhered to that for a while. Not that I'm breaking the law, but we did the loop, and you just, I mean, you do it 10 times, you're doing 100 miles. Is it boring as all get out? It can be, but at the same time, there was no traffic. And so, okay, that's not the best thing, but at least you're riding. I think for younger athletes, it could be a little bit of a challenge, but I saw a question that came in about working on skills and stuff like that. If you're a young athlete, if you're 13, 14 years old, then you can set up a loop or someplace near your house where you can actually ride. That's not so far away, and you can work on cornering skills, and you can work on other skills if it's safe and if it's available to you. And I think that's a good thing. I think you have it's another opportunity to build on the skills you already have.
Yeah. So related to that, I'm a big proponent of skills development. As we go from a point where we're not riding with anybody at all, and then we jump back into bike racing immediately, I don't know, maybe I'm a pessimist, but I'm figuring that the crash ratio is going to go up. So what's the recommendation on that? I mean, I think of, interposing a skill development period and group ridings and things like that before you return to full bike racing. What are your guys' thoughts?
I think, with the groups, the teams, the clubs, I think going out and working in conjunction with each other to try to improve the skills before a race would make sense. I mean, in the other sports, in the ball sports, you have spring training to get used to being, and then you have, full contact, with some sports. You have to, evolve into those things. So I agree, Sean. If you haven't been on a bike in a while and you haven't ridden in proximity and you've been doing Zwift rides, when you have to really then, they're shooting live bullets at you finally, you're going to have some interim place to start. And local skills with the group, with the club, with each other, 4 or 5 guys going out, 3 guys, it doesn't matter. You can go out and practice bumping and wheel touching and things, just like we did in the junior camps for years and years and years. And that will pay off because it's not like a skilled rider forgets what it's like to race in a bunch. It just takes a couple times and they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think if you have the ability to ride with your club or your team, and even if you were to put together a 5-day camp or something like that and ride 2x2 for hours, if you're able to do that, that's going to help you. And yeah, I think the racing when it comes back will be very aggressive. I have no doubt about that. I think that's going to be worldwide. But to see the stats, it'd be interesting that if we could put crash stats all together and find out if it's higher or lower. I don't really know, but I think it'll be aggressive, and I think that's good, to be honest with you. We'll see. I think that's one thing. I mean, there was a couple of questions there about Zwift, and that's one thing that Zwift will not teach you at all, which is unfortunate.
Unfortunately, in today's environment, there's a lot of things the current group ride's not going to teach you either, but that's a whole other topic.
That's a whole other topic, yes.
So let's go into that topic. So the other night, last week, we had Rusty Miller on, right, with the Garrison brothers, right? And he talked about, the need, when you're learning these skills and you're trying to learn how to become a bike racer, that going out with the groups is good, and going to your Tuesday World Championships is good. And I've discussed this with you guys before, and I'm thinking like you, Joe, is that the mentorship quality and the quality of those rides has fallen since the time that Joe and I were juniors. Billy's a little younger. And so comment on that.
It's not, in a way, I'm of the opinion the current coaching industry, in a way, could potentially be bad for cycling development of what you're talking about, Sean. There isn't the club environment so much anymore that I grew up in, where it was kind of an apprenticeship type situation where you came into it and there were older riders that knew how to do a pace line and knew what side of the, where to sit on the wheel and how to point things out in the road and just all the etiquette skill things that I think are missing now, with the kind of the demise of the old school clubs, and it's unfortunate, and I think it's tantamount that riders that have the experience pass that along, but it's also on the new riders. And I'm not just talking about juniors. I'm talking about if you're a 40-year-old master racer that's just get into it, is to listen to the people that have been around the block a few times. Because if they're taking the time to explain something to you, you probably ought to listen, because they're ultimately trying to help you out. So I don't know if that answers.
Yeah, I would echo that completely. I have a short story to tell. So, I have this problem with always coaching. And I was on a group ride pre-pandemic, so PP. And in the time frame, there's BC, AD, and now PP. And I'm on the group ride, and the wind is coming from the left. And the pace line, the guys are pulling off to the right. And I explain to Super Master Bro that if you pull off into the left and everyone pulls off into the left, into the wind, then the pace line would go faster. And of course he turns around and tells me, "Don't tell me how to ride my bike." Okay. So is that just one example? It's fine. And it's unfortunate, but perhaps he likes a lot of virtual racing. I don't know.
Well, it's even one of my athletes that raced at the Tour Down Under commented that a World Tour team amassed at the front in a crosswind section and started to rotate in the wrong direction. So it's not just Master Bro. And unfortunately, a lot of these skills aren't being taught, or they're not being learned, or, I know we might sound like old guys yelling, "Get off our lawn," but maybe if you listen, you might learn a few things.
Yeah.
So to kind of build off that thought a little bit, Rusty brought up the idea of it takes a village, right? And this is what you've been kind of driving at, right? And a lot of what we've seen in the junior teams in the last decade or so, I don't even know, maybe even longer, maybe it even dates back to, the Plymouth Reebok days and, the 7-Eleven junior team, is the idea of, having the biggest thing on the block, and that, you're going to pick up the kids that are the best and brightest, right? As opposed to having those community-based programs that, like Joe and I started in, and that was, how we learned it, right? Got hit upside the head enough times, Wilson learned how to do this stuff, right? That's kind of how it went. I had that type of apprenticeship just like Joe. You care to comment on that role of that community-based programming versus, those large regional, national, what, I would consider some of these things are basically a national team, right? And that's the way I would look at, a couple of these teams that we have here in the United States, the way they amass the riders from all over the place, right?
Yeah, I think it's a challenge, obviously. And I don't know how, I can't look back and think of one thing that created this evolution of, maybe it's the bike shops. Are there group rides out of the bike shops anymore? Are there not? But in terms of teams and what happens with teams, talent is always going to attract talent. I hate to use the word talent, but if you have a car show and somebody shows up, if everyone has a Toyota and somebody shows up with a Formula One car, everyone's going to go look at the Formula One car. So I look at teams the same way. It's that if a team is building on its own success and creates this culture and creates this thing that people are attracted to, the best talent will go there. I think that's relatively normal. But there are a lot of to take a Formula One term, a lot of midfield teams that can punch above their weight. And maybe they started as community-based teams. So I don't necessarily think that it's a bad thing, especially in my world, which is really specific. And, I want to make that very clear, is that if there are 400 juniors in the country and I'm only taking 6 kids to Europe at a time, like that is I'm using a very fine comb. But we do need those community-based programs. We absolutely need to. And it's the kind of thing where maybe parents and kids, when they go into bike shops or wherever the centers are of cycling, where these groups are forming and where these clubs are forming, that they need to have a conversation as where are the group rides, where are the races, do you guys do this, do you guys do that, and how can I be involved? And from there, people will move forward or stay at the same level. It just depends on what they'd like to do.
I think there might be some World Tour riders right now that are racing in the World Tour that didn't come from prestigious club teams. They came from clubs. And I probably would have to pull them up and we could sort through them, but not everybody that's been successful came from, a stellar, junior program. A lot of them came from, mom and pop programs, if you will, came from local clubs and stuff. They just came up the way that Sean and Joe are talking about coming up. So I don't really, I don't really think that a big renowned junior club team is the only way to get to the top. Yeah, you get notoriety and you get visibility and you get a lot of toys and shiny objects, but you still got to race your bike. At the end of the day, you still got to race your bike.
Well, and I'm going to use a specific local boy example of Keel Reinen.
Exactly.
Keel's a perfect example of someone that wasn't on the big shiny team, big shiny thing team. He started out with the local bike shop here on Bainbridge Island, and he, I think, through a talent ID camp, got invited to the junior to a junior trip when the house was still in Isleham. Yeah. And for whatever reason, Keel did not make the cut out of that program. But he kept at it. And I think Barney, didn't he end up, was it your waste management program at one point, and then did the domestic pro team thing, and finally he's a pretty well respected elder statesman of World Tour team now.
Right.
So
and I noticed that Ken Roscoff's name was on the list of people that were watching this today, and his son Joey is another example, a very good solid one of somebody that didn't ride for the bigger junior programs at the time. It was a regional, local, way up, and obviously it hasn't stopped him. So there's more out there than just those two, I'm sure.
I mean, so that dovetails into one of the questions that we've gotten from a number of kids. Was the best way to sum it up is this one here from Cole that says, how does one get on the junior national team? Is it through recruitment or ranking?
To be honest with you, it's through race results. So if you were to look at the guys that you're racing with now that are juniors that are going over to Europe and coming back and racing in America, it would behoove you to beat them because those guys have made the cut, and they've also performed well in Europe, which, as we all know, that's where this sport is based. And I can't see it changing anytime soon. It's based in Switzerland, and it's run by French, and it is European based. And so much like if you would like to become a baseball player, you would not move to Belgium. You would move probably to America to learn how to play baseball. So it's the reason why we race so much in Europe, and why I take as many kids as I possibly can, budget withholding or budget restricted to Europe. And it's to prove ourselves at that level against the guys that you're going to be racing with for a very long time. That's something that I always try to explain to the guys, that when we race in Europe, the Swiss kid that you may be battling at Tour de Pays de Vaud may be your teammate in 4 years. And so getting on the national team, yes, it's at times it can seem like it's very subjective. And there are reasons why I put certain guys on certain teams. And sometimes that bears fruit and sometimes it does not. But there's a methodology behind it. But really, results are the main thing. FTP, watts per kilogram, TSS, TSB, whatever acronym you want to throw, those things do have a place, but they are not the be-all, end-all. I know a lot of athletes, in my experience, and especially I've seen it up close and personal, that have tested through the roof and cannot race their bicycles to save their lives. So it really, really depends on the skills that you have in the pack. And getting to the front in America is very easy. It's super simple. We have gigantic roads and the races are not that technical. It is much different when you're trying to get to the front when a road is as wide as my team car. It's much, much different. And so you have to be able to hold very consistent power for a longer period of time compared to the US, where you could do possibly 1 or 2 bursts of power and stay away from the pack that you're in, whether it's a Cat 3 field or even a Cat 1-2 field, and especially a junior field. So I don't know if that really answers the question, kind of roundabout way.
Well, see, I mean, you got into a lot of it, and it brings up a couple of other interesting points, right? I mean, you talk about performance, but now you're talking about racing in Europe, right? So a kid, what if they can't go with you, do they go over there on their own? Is that what you're suggesting?
Absolutely you can. And I think I think nowadays it's very cost effective to go race in Europe, and especially in Belgium. Belgium is a very low cost place to race your bike, and it's a great place to go and cut your teeth. The Kermesse scene in and of itself is a great way to develop your skills and to see really what the lowest level of racing is. That's the lowest level of racing that the national team does. And it is cutthroat. I'm not going to lie. And it's much different than the Nations Cup races that we do, which are a much higher level in terms of intensity and benefit, as it were. But it's also a lot more controlled because it's a little bit more political when it comes to national teams. But with Kermesses and even 2.1s and 1.1s or 1.2s that are racing in Belgium, if you can get into those interclubs, you will learn how to race your bike without a doubt. And you will find out whether you like it or not pretty quickly.
Yeah, so in a few weeks, we're trying to work on having Greg from the Chainstay and a couple of other people on to specifically discuss about those types of trips and things like that people can do to get over there.
Yeah, good. Yeah, he's a great guy. He runs a really good program too, and it's a really good place to learn. Yeah,
so I mean, going into the cost a little bit more. I mean, by all rights, I mean, people are thinking we're heading into a recession. I mean, that's going to be impacting the finances of this stuff in a fairly large way. At least I think so. I mean, can you care to comment on like what it costs to get over there? I mean, a lot of people probably have no idea.
No, yeah, it's a lot easier. I'll tell you what though. So a couple of things. It's a lot easier to learn how to do it now than when I was doing it. So in '97, when I hopped on a plane with $400 in my pocket and hoped that my friend who promised to pick me up in Brussels airport or bring me back to Oudenaarde, I was happy that he was there. And so it was just all through letter writing and phone calls. So there's almost no excuse not to try to figure it out on your own because you have the internet and you have $1,000 computer in your pocket. So what does it cost? Well, it's $1,500 for a plane ticket. If you get into Brussels, you can take a train for $20 to wherever you need to go to. Staying and where you stay is a different story. I mean, you can run it on the cheap and try to rent a place with a bunch of your teammates or a bunch of your friends if you want to do it. You could stay at the Chainstay for which is cost effective, I think, because Greg can take you to certain races. But once you're there, racing is very cheap. It's unlike America where races are $30 to $50 a pop. There, they're only 15 euros, and you get 5 euros back if you give your number back. So it's really, really cheap. So all in all, I think if you had maybe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking if you had probably $2,000 on top of your plane ticket, you're living well. You're racing well all summer long. Don't overstay your visa. I wouldn't recommend that. But yeah, you can do it pretty cheaply. Racing in France and racing in Germany and Italy, much, much different. You need to be on a club. It's really challenging to race on your own there. So Belgium is the easiest place to go.
So, I know like with your Newligan trips and things like that, you take them over for kind of defined periods of time. I mean, what's your recommendation, like for 15, 16 and 17, 18, and even the U23, what kind of time period should they go over for?
Yeah, so 15, so Newlingen, just so everyone's probably like, what is that word? Newlingen is what they call 15, 16s in Belgium. So everybody here in America is called a junior from your 10 years old all the way to your 18. There and in France and in Italy, it's very specific as to what age group you are. So 15, 16s, I try to bring them over for 3 weeks at a time. That's about the length of attention span at that point in the season. So it's usually August. This year I was planning on maybe doing a 4-week trip, which would have kind of included Tour of Ireland, but now that Tour of Ireland is canceled, it's a little bit challenging. So, but even for juniors, 17, 18-year-olds, 3 to 4 weeks, depending on the athlete. And, Barney and Joe and I always use the term, it depends. It really depends on the athlete. Some athletes are fine living in Europe. I mean, I coach an athlete right now who he'd live in Europe the entire year. Magnus Sheffield, for instance, he would live in Europe the entire year. Like, he's totally fine with that. He's very comfortable over there. Quinn Simmons was the same. Some athletes do not do well in Europe. And that's kind of the way it is. It's no different than kids that go away to college and kids that stay at home. It's the same kind of thing. So yeah, I think if you're 15, 16, I would go over for 3 weeks because you could race 6 times. So you're limited to 2 races per week. Juniors are limited to 3 races per week if you're just doing kermesses. If you're a 19 or 20-year-old, go over until you crack. That's what I would say.
And so it's good that Billy touched on that as far as racing in Belgium. You are limited on the number of races you can do a week, and they track that. Like they give you a calendar card, and you have to present that card, and officials will mark it. And if you're a 15, 16-year-old and you try to race a 3rd race during the week, they're just going to look at you and go like this.
Yeah. But now
they might even say it's not possible.
Now it's on the internet, Joe. You don't need your card anymore. Now they track you. You have a number. Yeah, but they will track you for sure. But that's the thing with racing over there too, and it could be the first trip that you go to Europe. If you go and enjoy yourself, racing is fun, but it's also, you're also in Belgium. You're in the center of cycling, so go see some stuff, and you're close to France and you're close to all these other places. So if you go and you race for 3 weeks, then perhaps take a week off on the tail end of it, or in the middle of it if you want to stay for longer, and go see some things, because Europe is a beautiful, beautiful place for sure. Barney knows. He knows the Czech Republic like the back of his hand.
Yeah. Yeah. I learned the hard way. I learned when you went over and Noel gave you a map to the race and said, just go straight. And there's not a straight road in all of Belgium that I could find, but there was no GPS, and that's how you made it to the race. You found it with a literal Michelin map, and that's how you found it. So, but it was great because you learned a lot, and the kids learned that there was always a designated navigator in the car. He's like, here's a map. You tell me when the next turn comes. and we had it penciled out. That was the way it worked, but it worked. For the kids that can go today and individuals, I would even 19, 20, 23-year-old guys that still have a burning inside to see what it's like, by all means, make it work. Go do it, because it is a heck of a lot easier now than it was, 20 years ago, guaranteed.
Yeah, so we're getting barraged with questions, because you brought up the thing about, go to Belgium, go to Belgium, go to Belgium. And they're still asking about, like, why can't I race in France? What about Switzerland and other countries? I mean, you brought up the idea of having to be on a team. Do you have to be on a team in order to race in Italy and France? Or do you show up as an individual?
Yes and no. So yes, you can. It's a little bit more challenging. And I think, so France is an interesting, I love France. I love racing in France. I didn't like it so much as a rider because it's really hilly. But it's a little bit more challenging, especially if you don't speak French. Just not to grossly generalize, but it's a very closed system. So you better speak French really well, or have a really good translator or friends there, and that could get you into a club. But it's a lot easier if you're on a club. Yes, you can race in Switzerland for sure, but there are not so many races there. If you want to race mountain bikes in Switzerland, you have a lot of opportunity to race mountain bikes, or if you want to do cyclocross. But road racing, they tend to travel out of Switzerland. You have to understand how small, I don't think a lot of kids don't realize how the proximity of each country is to each other. I mean, if you drive from, I live in Northern California, and if I drive to San Diego, that would be akin from me driving to Russia from the Netherlands. Like, that's how small Europe is. So, in 9 hours, I'm at the UCI Center from the Netherlands, from where our house is. So yeah, you can race in those other places, but it's a lot easier to race in Belgium. Like, as funny and as closed as Belgium is, like, they're really welcoming to cyclists because they created it. They created bicycle racing, and so they're really good at it.
Billy,
And the thing too is that there are so many kermesses that are on the same day in Belgium. For a Belgian to drive an hour and a half, that's too far, too far. But for us, it's nothing. And again, there's a really good website with the calendar on it, and you can just go through and pick, and you typically have your choice of, I'd say, at least 2, sometimes 3 kermesses, especially on a weekend. So that's the other reason why it's so much easier there.
Yeah.
Billy, do French provincial teams still have a limit of 2 non-French riders per team?
Yes.
So that right will tell you. And those 2 riders, but my son was on a French provincial team when he first, at 19, when he first went to Europe. He was one of 2 Americans on the team, and he got a lot of races, but he was pretty much the lone ranger on the team. And it's a very, very hard way to go. Very hard.
Yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, we've built up relationships with French U23 teams over the past couple of years, and I am friendly with quite a few of them, and it is a little bit easier now to get a rider on a French U23 team. Junior team is a little bit more challenging, for sure. And Sean, you brought up the economy and what's going to happen with the economics of this thing, and that is my personal concern, because a lot of these races, a lot of these kermesses start and center around a bar. So a bar will be the sponsor of the race. And if these bars have been closed for 2.5 months in Belgium and their revenue has gone down, I'm concerned that it's probably won't be this year, but perhaps the next year. I've already seen a decline in races, kermesses specifically. In Belgium, it hasn't been that bad as of yet, and Joe is absolutely correct. Like, there can be 3 races all within the same proximity in West Flanders, this on the one weekend, but on one Saturday. But in a couple of years' time, I hope that these races are still around.
So I want to come in with a lighthearted question. We're getting asked, what is that World Championship jersey behind you there, Barney?
Well, in my younger days, I was never a world champion. It's McNulty's junior replica jersey, I guess. I don't think I got the original one.
I don't think you'd want the original. That was probably pretty sweaty. That was a hot day.
Yeah. Well, that's what Doha means, hot.
Yes.
So, we have some young women on the call, and so what opportunities are there for our junior women riders?
I know that Mari is putting together and had put together a bunch of trips this year. Obviously, things have been curtailed, and certain European countries, much like our states, are opening up right now at different rates. So, for instance, everything in the Netherlands has been shut. There is no racing until September 1st in the Netherlands. Right now, Belgium has races starting July 1st. I've heard from a couple of directors that things may be delayed further depending on what happens with the pandemic. So there are opportunities for junior women for sure. I would suggest that all of them reach out to Mari Holden, as she's the one running the program, and contact her and let her know that you're all interested, because it is there will be more and more opportunities in the future, as long as we have if we have the funding. That's always the tricky part of this whole
Yeah,
thing.
and on that note, we're going to have Mari on with Megan Jastrab and Emma White in 2 weeks,
Awesome.
so they can ask her directly there.
Yeah, I mean, I only work with the junior men. They're a handful as it is.
It's enough.
So we actually have a lot of U23s on here, and then we have some other younger riders. We'll start with the younger riders. So we have, like say we have a novice rider coming in, getting on the road, in a 15, 16. They're just kind of starting out. How do they cut their teeth? What kind of experience? How do they acquire the skills and gain experience?
Joe, race as much as you can.
Yeah, race as much as you can. Race as much as you can. Seek out advice, but also be careful of who you're getting advice from.
I'm surprised you didn't ask how many hours a week you should ride.
It depends.
Which is a really, really tricky question. That's a really tricky question to ask for especially a young rider, 15, 16. I think, it really depends on the athlete. If the athlete has a full beard or not at 15.
So going over to the U23s, I mean, we have, there's a lot of anxiety amongst the juniors that are aging out, right? There's gonna be no real racing for them for the remainder of the year. And, what are their pathways? And a lot of them want to get seen by the U23 teams, whether it be, Mike Creed's program or, something more local to them. I mean, what kind of, so the first question would be, what kind of opportunities exist for the U23 riders in the United States in a global context?
That's a great question. I think you have seen over the past few years, you've seen a decline in racing in America. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. I think a lot of races have gone away. So that's a great question, and I don't really know how to exactly answer that, other than there are a few teams out there that would provide an opportunity for you. Showing off your wares and showing off your skills now is a lot more challenging. I think that I don't know how to put it, but like Instagram strength and showing off, being a presence on social media, I think that's probably going to help, and testing as well. I think that it would behoove you. You have an opportunity now. That's going back to our original conversation, actually, with what this opportunity could be. If you look at this as a career-ending pandemic, well, I also look at it as an opportunity for you to get a lot more testing done, to show improvement and to show, to track your improvement throughout the year, because a threshold test done every 3 weeks is going to be detrimental eventually. But if you can get them, now you can do quite a few of them throughout the season, if that's the case, and you can present that as evidence that you are improving. But I think it's going to come down to when we're racing and if we're racing, and you really have to just you're going to have to put up a result or two at this point. But everyone is in the same boat, like Barney was saying before, and like we've all been saying. And it's the same thing is happening in Europe. There's a lot of consternation in Europe about what's going to happen. Our World Tour team is going to eject the older riders because they haven't done anything and they're expensive, and replace them with new younger riders that are unproven. I don't know yet. I have no idea.
I think to add to what Billy was saying too is something that I've always preached to the younger riders, both when I was a domestic elite team director and now working with young athletes, is build relationships, network, like be good at that. And because it's like anything in life, it's a relationship driven sport. And just always take the opportunity to meet new people and act professional, because you never know who somebody might be on the group ride. Yeah, I mean, that results matter, but a lot of the other things about being a complete rider are as important, if not more so, when it comes to landing a position on a team and find a niche for yourself.
I agree with what Joe said, and holding on to that position once you get it is often, you know, obviously if you're the guy that's winning all the races, you'll hold on to a spot. But if you're a solid citizen and you're a good teammate and you've got good character, you're going to have a job for a long time because you're a good guy, a good gal, a good person, you know. So that's, I think that's probably equally as important once you get a position on a team, the quality of your character.
Yep.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I was just on a phone call the other day with there were a bunch of coaches, and a Navy SEAL was talking to us all, and he was talking about leadership. And he said something, you know, that really resonated with me, is that he was a selector. So he was the guy that was yelling at the recruits, the Navy SEAL recruits. And he was the one that was selecting these guys to move through and become Navy SEALs. Now, obviously, you know, this is high level stuff, but he looked at character, commitment, and communication. And those were his main things. And that really stuck with me, because I realized that that's exactly what I do at a much lower level with sports. We're not getting shot at. It makes a big difference. But I've selected people on their character to come to Europe, regardless of their results, you know, because I just know what that person is like, and I know what that person has brought to the team. I know how committed they are. That's another thing. And it's really, really important, because that goes a really long way. So if you're not on the shiny team, but you're really committed and your character shines through, you will prove that out. And if you're willing to communicate, that's the main thing, especially something that I've seen over the years. Criticism is taken as a negative. It is not a negative. When I criticize a rider, it's to get them to be better, because I'm seeing something that they haven't seen. And I usually start the conversation with, what did you see? Well, let me tell you what I saw. And criticism is not a bad thing. It's actually a really, really good thing. But you have to be willing to have yourself open to that discussion, especially after a race. And more often than not, it's when the race went really, really well, because you think you've done nothing wrong, which possibly. And when a race goes really, really bad, you have to be very open to that communication. So these are important things for sure.
And to kind of build on this as well, like, I know, you know, Billy does this in my capacity with, I'll use the junior national team, which is what I've been doing mostly lately. When Barney did it, I'm sure it was the same way. We're observing all the time. And it's, you know, okay, who's the kid that always is the first one to like grab the broom? And who's the kid that always manages to like slide off and go up to his room? Or who's the kid that comes out and helps load the van or unpack the van and clean the van? It's like, it's all that stuff. And it's, we're watching. So
yeah, I think
be a good person.
Yeah. I mean, this is my advice to all the juniors that are on this call, and even U23s and everyone is, do the things off the bike as well as you do your work on the bike. Riding a bike is easy. It's super simple. But are you resting as hard as you're training? Or are you up until 2 o'clock in the morning and looking at someone else's Instagram for whatever reason?
To Billy's point, it's what you're doing when no one's watching that counts.
And Hawks is always watching.
Yeah.
Always.
So we've had a really great conversation. We're up to the top of the hour. I did want to just get into two other topics if you guys have a few more moments. One, we brought up the virtual racing really early on in the discussion. But, a lot of people are doing it. Is it something that you would recommend? And are you actually monitoring this stuff at all? Are you kind of looking at what's going on, or?
No, but and I say that only because I have a lot to do at the moment. I think that it is right now. It's a means to an end, and I think it's better than nothing. But I have a friend of mine that's in the military, and I asked him. I was like, "Would you train for an operation using Call of Duty?" And he just started laughing at me. And so I look at Zwift the same way. I think it's a really good tool, but I'm worried that it's becoming the end product at the moment. But I would ask all the people on the call to remind me of the people that have qualified for pro teams through Zwift. And don't look it up on the internet. Just name them off the top of your head.
So I'm going to go on the other side of it.
Of course you are.
I agree. I agree with the big picture that Billy is talking about. Like, Zwift racing isn't real racing. For me personally and my athletes, I've actually encouraged them to try it out. And what I've found, even with the athletes that were the most resistant to it, oh, I hate riding on the trainer. Well, nobody really likes riding on the trainer, right? Oh, it's just a video game. Well, yeah, it is just a video game, but wrap your head around it. And it, even Mari and I were talking about this today. It checks the competitive box, first of all, right? Because we can't even do the group rides anymore, like the throwdown ride. Like, that's not available to you. You go up by yourself. I know, at least for myself, and I would guess the majority of the people on this call, you push yourself more when there are others there to push you. So in a way, Zwift is reactive. You have to react to what is going on. So I know for myself, and like I was talking to Keel Reinen, we've put out Keel's put out his best numbers of the year on Zwift, and he has done some World Tour races. So there's also a physiological response. So and at the end of the day, a Zwift race is like 45 minutes long. So it's a good bang for your buck. It checks some boxes, and it's what we have right now. And it's a resource, and I think it's worth utilizing.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I don't want to sound like I don't like it because Joe convinced me to sign up for it, and I have to admit, it is a lot of fun, and I really do like it, and it is a fun tool, and I agree with Joe 100% about what he said. So I'm needling a little bit, only because it's like going to the batting cage and thinking you can hit a home run in some ways, but the fact that they are only an hour to 45 minutes, I mean, that's a really, really good. It's a good workout, and if that's all you have right now, then yeah, I would do it for sure. And it's looking at the metrics and looking at the data that's coming out of it. As long as you're not lying about how much you weigh, and if you're doing everything spot on, and which I would recommend all of you on this call, don't lie. Like, don't try to cheat. Like, really put it, because if you're using it to track your fitness, then it's really, really good. So, which means you need to weigh yourself and keep track of that data. And if it recommends you have an upgrade, then upgrade yourself, and then push yourself to the next level of group, and just see how you do. But yeah, it is fun.
And the other thing that Mari and I were talking about, like there are those of you that have done Zwift, like you know that there are different courses with different characteristics, and there is information out there on the internet to find out, okay, you know, what are the characteristics of this course? What's the, you know, best virtual bike and wheels that I can use? And well, guess what? That's like a real bike race. You know, like when you get a technical guide for a race, I hope you guys are looking at it. You know, I hope you read the race Bible. I hope you go on the internet and find out what the prevailing winds are or what the weather's going to be like all this stuff. So you can build there's some skill building here as well. So, and no, I don't have any stock in Zwift. So
I think as a coach and as an athlete, you need to take advantage of the things that are there and utilize those things that exist. It may not be exactly perfect. In a perfect world, we'd have bike races and we wouldn't be sitting here doing an online chat. But we're not there. So what do we have that we can use? That's one of the tools that's there that every coach and every rider can take advantage of and use. And I think we would be remiss as coaches if we didn't utilize those things. Plus, a lot of riders now have teams that are making it an obligation for the rider to do it, which I think is good because the riders need to understand that with support comes responsibilities. And if they have a responsibility to do a Zwift race because they've gotten support with equipment and clothing and things this season, they need to fulfill that obligation. And that's a lesson that you need to learn in life. So it's an important component, and it took me a while to come to grips with we would be utilizing, video games and bike racing, but it goes back to the old days of the CompuTrainer. People, when they first told me you could race a CompuTrainer with somebody in Australia, and I said, well, that's stupid, but look where we're at now.
On that note, we actually do have USA Cycling is sponsoring Zwift races. Eric Hill from Project Echelon has actually put together a series where they're doing an homage to the different PRT races, and I helped set up the one for the Redlands Classic. I work as part of the Redlands Classic team, and I helped him navigate that process. And ours actually is tomorrow and Sunday. So we have two different events. And we sent everything off to media, race media, and it's got, their DET and pro teams. And so it'll look and feel like a bike race. Yes, it'll be a lot shorter than a regular bike race, but
yeah,
it'll be a bike race.
That's cool. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's fun. I mean, they're fun I'm not going to lie. They're kind of fun to watch.
Well, I think 5 days on a trainer for a real simulation of the race would be child abuse or human abuse. I don't think you can get too many people to actually do that. Maybe, but
maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. So they will be broadcasting those live, and they're going to have commentators. So tune in tomorrow. They're up on Zwift, the Zwift channel or whatever it is.
Right on.
So the last question that I wanted to address is it's another one from our participants was, what are the things, physical, mental, whatever else that seem to be the most common performance limiters amongst junior riders, and I would even say amongst U23s.
Oof. Well, for one, I would say that when kids come over and they think they're on European vacation, like that's right away. I can see that. I spot that a mile away. And they think it's going to be super jolly fun time, and we're going to have ice cream every night and stuff like that. And that's okay. That's what I see. I think I know that the word grit gets thrown around quite a lot, and resilience is the new catchphrase. I'm not sure if it's a banned word just yet, but I think that if you're not adaptable to the environment that you're in, you're going to have a really, really hard time. And a lot of this life, which some of you are striving for, involves a massive amount of day-to-day change and things that happen on the fly. So if you're a very steady person that likes everything planned out for the entire year, this is going to be a challenging life for you. And you have to just kind of come to grips with that. I think that was something that hindered me. I'm a very process-oriented person. Those of you that know me, I'd like to plan out the entire season. And this year has been a really huge challenge for me personally, because I have my calendar set and scheduled, and races were entered in November. Like, I'm done. I have everything mapped out all the way through Worlds. So if you're a rider that likes to have that, Barney and I used to talk about throwing a fire drill at them. And it was like, okay, you've got to leave in a race in 2 hours. What do you take? And sometimes, and for those of us that know World Tour riders, that happens. You're a replacement rider, and all of a sudden you're going to the Tour de France. And we've heard stories of that. And I've heard stories about all of a sudden you're going to Tirreno, or, oh, somebody got injured and now you're doing the Giro. So I think that if you're not adaptable, you're going to have a hard time. That's what I've seen.
Yeah, every team every junior team, every under 23 team, anyone I ever traveled with, the first thing that I told every rider was, you have to be flexible, because there's so many things that are out of our control. Vans break down, cars come up lame, people get hurt. I've been in every hospital or medical facility in most of Europe at some point in time with a broken rider. And you have to be flexible. There are things that come up in the course of a trip that require flexibility. And if a young rider, if anyone is inflexible in the way that they deal with things, good luck, because flexibility is going to get you a long way. And only control the things that you can control. Most everything is out of your control, but being organized, being ready, being prepared, being ready to do your part, you can control. You can't control the pandemic, certainly can't control it. You can't control when things break, they're gonna break. And when people get injured, you just have to deal with it. So flexibility, first and foremost.
So one more hardball question. Do you think that juniors are still under pressure to dope?
Not by me.
Not by me.
I haven't seen it.
I mean, that's a tricky question. I think that a lot of times, well, where's the pressure coming from? That would be my question, right? So if a rider is tempted to dope, then where is the pressure coming from? Is it coming from the ability or the lack of ability to move in society? We have it really easy compared to the rest of the world in America. And this is a good gross generalization, but you can go to school and get a job in here. You don't automatically just go pay for university in the Netherlands. You have to qualify. You have to test in, and then there are only so many universities that you can go to. That being said, you can make a really good living being a waiter. You can make a really good living working in a coffee shop for the rest of your life. So when I was racing in Hungary, those guys that were my teammates were under a lot of pressure to do certain things that I did not agree with, because their alternative was to work in a shoe factory. That was it. Or the Coca-Cola factory that was in town. So the pressure to dope as a junior, my question is, where is that coming from? Because to me, that's really sad if that's coming from a junior that's placing that on himself. If it's coming from his parents or it's coming from his team director or something, then that's a really big problem. You rarely see it in Europe. Very rarely. I don't know if that answers your question. I'm kind of roundabout.
Joe had something else he wanted to bring up about limiters, and maybe it speaks to pressures also. And I think it is worthy to note, Joe. But go ahead.
Oh, the biggest limiter? Really? You're gonna unleash me to say this? Parents.
Yeah, and I would agree with that to a certain degree. I think that those of you that know me, I take a very measured approach to parents. There are some parents I keep at arm's length, and some parents I keep away with a 10-foot pole because they think that their son is going to be Eddie Merckx, and their son is not going to be Eddie Merckx because Eddie Merckx was Eddie Merckx. Now it's Evenepoel. My kid's going to be the next Evenepoel. Well, if you're always getting 20th and you're always getting 30th in a local bike race, that's an hour long. I'm sorry, you're not going to be Remco Evenepoel. That's just not going to happen. Are you going to be the next Quinn Simmons? Maybe, but yeah, parents, I hate to say it, but they can be a limiter. I think that my advice, I've been really lucky. I've worked, the athletes that I work with, they have parents that allow their kids to fall down, allow their kids to make mistakes and figure it out on their own, which is, I think, was really generous of parents. It's a tough, I don't have kids. And so I do have kids. I have 6 kids every 3 weeks. But I don't envy parents. It's tough. And cycling it's a tough world. It's a really tough, sport's a really tough world. I shouldn't say it's just cycling, it's sport in general. I've been really lucky that I'm working with a lot of other Team USA coaches from all across all disciplines. And they all say the same things, that sport, you want to be a bobsledder, that's a rough life. You want to be a figure skater, that's a rough life. You want to be gymnastics superstar in the Olympics, that's a rough life. There's a lot of sacrifice. But that also means that parents should be involved and they should be really supportive. But my personal opinion is that you should allow your kids to make certain mistakes. Small ones, not big ones. Don't crash the car. Don't steal my team car. Things like that. Don't be a punk. But, be yourself also, and allow their characters to develop on their own.
One story I've told numerous times when I kind of talk about my kid's going to be the next Eddie Merckx, I was actually having a conversation with Axel Merckx about a junior athlete that I was coaching at the time, and who Axel was interested in bringing into his program. And we were talking about this particular athlete's father, and the father was always, well, why didn't you win the bike race kind of guy? And Axel laughed, and in his very Belgian way, it was like, my dad is the greatest cyclist that ever lived, and he only won 30% of his bike races. So, think about that.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very telling story, because in cycling, you're going to fail more often than you succeed. That is a given. And if Eddie Merckx is only winning 30% of his bike races, chances are you're probably going to have a little bit lower hit rate than that.
Yep.
Well, on that note, I really want to thank you guys for coming on. And if there's any other parting words of wisdom that you would have, now would be a great time to do it. And I just want to remind everybody, this is being recorded, and we will post this on our YouTube channel. And next week we have the Foundation for American Track Cycling on, and that'll be a great conversation where they'll talk about how to deal with track cycling in a pandemic world and you can't get on the track. And then the following week, we will have Mari Holden along with some phenomenal athletes to discuss the women's side of sport. So I'll leave it up to you guys to give the parting words.
Have fun.
Be safe and find something every day that makes you smile or laugh, because laughter's good.
Train your strengths and train your weaknesses. So basically, just keep training.
All right. I want to thank everybody for coming on. And this is Junior Bike Chat. And please tune in for our future editions. And thank you guys for coming on board and bearing with me tonight and our participants.
Thanks, Sean. And thanks,
Yep.
everybody that tuned in.
John,
Thanks,
Fun.
everybody.
appreciate it.